Now, Inmendham is not the smartest guy on YouTube, but he's pretty damn smart. He's smarter than most. Probably smarter than I am. If I had to make a bet as to whether I was smarter than Inmendham, I would probably bet no. His last video to me was really great. I thought it was one of, maybe not his best video, but I thought it was one of the better ones. I thought it was a good video, but that could quite be personal bias because I like myself. So let's talk about liking myself. He asked me to address I can't address all of 40 minutes of his comments, but I can prioritize some of them. And one was about the addiction to life. And yes, I am addicted to life. I'm addicted to being me. And life is the only thing in the universe that has value. As such, I am addicted to the only thing in the universe that has value. Now, that's a simple syllogism, right? I certainly wouldn't. Syllogisms are simplifications, so I wouldn't expect that to convince Inmendham. But that's what I'll say about the addiction argument, I guess we might call it. And maybe we'll need to go in that further, but I don't know, that's my basic response. Now, he said a lot of other great things too, and I definitely want to address at least a couple of them in our conversation of environmental economics. So, the environment. Inmendham makes this great comment, and I don't have the exact wording of it, but it's about, the ego of humans to think that there's some state the environment should be in. The environment is just the environment, and it'll be in a number of states. So here we've got a range of states the environment can be in. Here's the ranging from at the cold end, the coldness of the vacuum of space, which is really cold. On the cold nights in the wintertime, I think about how warm that is compared to outer space. Oh my God. And then the fiery inferno in the middle of the sun, right? The environment can be anywhere along this line. And this little interval is the space that is the right temperature for supporting life. It's small, and if we fuck it up, the probability of us being outside that interval is greater than the system coming back to be in that interval, depending on how much we fuck it. But anyways, his point is correct. I totally agree with him in here. Environmental economics is not about the environment. It's about the individuals in the environment and their relationship to it. After all, like I'm pointing out here, the individuals in the environment need the environment to survive. I would have a hard time getting by without any oxygen. So that's the environment, and so that's kind of the what we're talking about here. Now, he also asked me to talk about the imposition argument, the imposition of risk upon other beings, basically progeny. Now, I haven't been talking about the imposition argument because I believe it relies on the asymmetry argument, and I'll explain why here, right? Why it relies on the asymmetry argument, and what I've been doing is refuting the asymmetry argument. Now, I'm not going to argue with the idea that life includes uncertainty. There's certain risks to being alive. But the thing we need to do is evaluate risks. So we're going to do this with a simple example of a game. And the game costs $1 to roll a 6-sided die. And we have two versions of this game. In one version of the game, if you roll a 6, you gain $5. And in the other version of the game, if you roll a 6, you gain $7. And basically I'm saying the one with the higher payoff is the one worth playing, and the one with the lower payoff you should not play. So to do the calculation, we're going to do a calculation called expected value. And the expected value is the payoff divided by the probability of receiving that payoff minus the cost of playing the game. So in our example here, For the low payoff, right, it was $5 divided by 6 because there's a 1 in 6 chance of rolling a 6 and getting the $5, and then subtract $1, and that result will be less than 0. This is a game no one should play. It's not that I shouldn't play this game, it's that no one should play this game. For a payoff of $7 divided by 6, subtract $1, we get a result that's bigger than 0. According to economic rationality, everyone should play this game. So it's not about which individual plays the game. It's about this idea of the expected value and the value of the payoffs that applies to everyone. So the imposition of risk is not about the risk itself. It's more about the imposition, that when you impose something on someone, you remove their autonomy. But non-existent people do not have autonomy, and neither do we have autonomy when we come into the world. Babies do not have autonomy. Autonomy is something that you learn, and it grows throughout your childhood. So that's the imposition argument, and that's why the imposition argument relies on the fact that the risk needs to that the payoff over the probability minus the cost is less than 0. If it's less than 0, then the game is not a good risk to play, and that's why the imposition argument relies on the asymmetry argument. So we'll talk about the asymmetry argument. There's been some videos this week about this asymmetry matrix. Here it is as laid out by Inmendham and Glynos. I think their matrices are the same, right? So basically we've got two choices, exist or not exist, and both of these will have both pleasure and pain. And so in their argument, it's got +1 if you exist for pleasure, -1 for pain, relates in a total of 0 for existence. For non-existence, the fact that a non-existent being does not receive pleasure, they give that a 0, and then the non-existent being not receiving pain, they give that a +1 for a total of +1. And now, I feel this is dichotomous, right? It's kind of like saying good, bad, therefore indifferent. Like if you had good and bad, then we get indifferent. And if you had indifferent to good, then you get good. Like it's all kind of good, bad, dichotomous thinking, which, as Hythloday points out, can quite easily lead to irreconcilable contradictions. So, again, with economics, we're going to talk about, well, how much? And we're going to do some little bit better math than just +1 and -1. For good and bad to equal 0, then good must equal bad. I think we can get a bit more nuanced with this. So we're going to revisit the matrix. So basically, let's start with these existing people. Basically, in the pleasure category, I'm talking about happiness. These guys both started with P, so I said, well, we're going to do happiness and suffering. So your total amount of happiness in life is the percent of your life where you experience happiness multiplied by the average intensity of that happiness. Similarly, experiencing pain is the percent of your life where you suffer multiplied by the intensity of that suffering. Now, this is a bit of ambiguity here, right? Because the intensity of suffering is greater than typically the intensity of happiness. So these things are not equal. This one is bigger than this one. And then but the percent of time that we do in the happiness is greater than the percent of time that we do in the suffering. So, while the intensity suffering is bigger than happiness, for the percent time happiness is bigger than suffering. creating ambiguous results. But because people, make the choices in life, we've got some control over how much happiness we receive and how much suffering we receive. Now, some of it's out of our control as well, so we'll never have zero suffering. Sometimes life just kicks you in the ass and gives you cancer and all kinds of horrible stuff. Like, this happens. But we, try and cure cancer with radiology and marijuana and all kinds of things to do about cancer. Basically, it's our drive that makes it so that we spend more time in happiness more than we do in suffering. Although suffering is really intense, we avoid it. And that's what will give this the positive value, presumably. Now, non-existence, that's an interesting question, right? And I'm going to break it down into types of non-existence, right? The argument here from the antinatalists usually relies on ad hominem reasoning because, well, the non-existent people don't feel. And so they always have to say things like, no one is lamenting the fact that there are no Martians. Now, if there were Martians, I think that we could learn something from them. And in fact, there are non-existent people that I am very concerned about, such as people in the future, which are likely to exist. Future generations of people don't exist yet, but there's a good chance they will, and I'm concerned about their well-being, and that's why I am arguing for sustainability, for meeting the needs of current generations without sacrificing the needs of future generations. So, but the thing is, it's not about what do I think about the non-existent people. It's about what would they feel if they were alive. Basically, the only difference between an existent person and a non-existent person is that the non-existent person doesn't exist. So here in the first part of the equations, we've got the same thing as we had in the existent thing, but we're going to multiply that by the probability that they will exist, right? So Martians are going to get a value very close to 0 here, whereas people in the future will get a value very close to this, right? Now, these guys definitely do exist, right? So basically we're multiplying that probability by 1, and these guys get a probability of something between 0 and 1, right? Therefore, 1 is bigger than the probability of existence. So existence is bigger than non-existence, right? Basically, the absolute value of existence is bigger than the absolute value of non-existence. So if existence is negative, then it's worse than non-existence. If existence is positive, then it is better than non-existence. But we think it's positive because of the autonomy. It leads to a positive for the average person. Now I'm going to get into why we calculate this for the average person on the next slide, right? And because on the next slide we're going to talk about exactly, well, it's positive, but how much is it? That's the question we want to know. So how much is the value of human life? And this is important to put a number in here, or some function of means of calculating the number, because if we do not assign some value to life, some specific value to human life, then it's the same as adding 0 in our calculations. So what we're going to do here is pay our expected value is the payoff of someone taking a dangerous job, of risking their life for money, divided by the probability of death. Now, obviously, there's a problem with this calculation in that it would take more money to get a richer person to take an expensive job. So by this calculation, rich people are worth more than poor people, and that seems incorrect. That I value my life just as much as you value your life, supposedly. So that's why we're going to take the average, as I was mentioning before. That the value of human life is what the average person would need to take a dangerous job given the probability of death at that job, right? So here's an estimate here. Basically, it's $650 for someone to take a dangerous job. And it's not excessively dangerous. This is based off of, I think, construction or roofing or something like that. Where 17.7 people out of 100,000 die on the job. So with this calculation, your life is worth $3,672,000 and $316. Now in economics, we might convert this to an annual figure, like divide this by the expected life of a person, so we could get an annual number, and that way young people are worth more than old people because they've got more life to lose. But because it's an average, the only way to make your life worth more is to raise the standard of living for everyone. The only way to raise the average is by making everyone better off, excluding outliers, of course. So that's my presentation on the value of human life, and I'm hoping that this will continue on the conversation of economics so we can see how we might use this in some of these calculations. So again, thanks for watching, and have a great afternoon.